What's up, Kenra? I'm Lo Wheeler, your color ambassador, and today we're doing something that isn't talked about enough. It is keeping your client's maintenance appointments minimal so that you can really save your energy and make a lot of impact with minimal placement. Here we have beautiful Amy, and I'm really excited to show you the simplest way to knock out a perfect beachy partial. Here we have Amy's hair, and we're looking at a good 6 months regrowth here. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay, beautiful. So what we have is a heavy foil regrowth, and today we're going to introduce a lot of face framing accents while we keep this very minimal in the maintenance for her. So it's going to be really lived in, really beachy. We're going to create a ton of ribbons, but we're also going to keep her base level really intact. So it's really easy for her to maintain. To begin Amy's hairline, I'm going to take a look at her natural flow of her hairline just to make some assessments of how I can lay in my diagonal foils. So I like to pick through and kind of get a lay of the surface space just so that I make a lot of impact without having excess foils, because we want to keep this very minimal. The idea here is to create a super impactful retouch with minimal effort. So I'm coming in just over her ear with a pretty medium weave pickup. I have it just at her temple here. And I'm going to start here and then work up about 3 foils deep, and then I'm going to go to the other side. For this, we have Kenra Blue Powder Lightener plus 20 volume. I'm only using 20 volume because she has a pretty light base level and her texture is pretty fine to fragile. So I'm just gonna start with 20 and trust the process that it is going to be adequate lift without pushing her hair into, any dryness. So here I'm laying on the lightener just through the mids where her regrowth is and just lightly feathering it through where her old color line is. Coming in at a slight diagonal is going to help us to get a softer transition, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up the first highlight right where her hairline is. This is a very subtle detail that's going to help us create a nice impact while keeping our placement minimal. I'm taking my brush and just feathering right up to the root of that hairline pickup, just as a little extra detail in my foil work. Because Amy has really fine texture, the viscosity of my lightener is a little on the thicker side, just so that I can apply the product on in a way that's going to help avoid unnecessary slippage. Again, I'm just feathering up through that transition and then making sure that the saturation is heaviest through that middle cold zone here. Now that I'm happy with this zone, I'm going to go ahead and do 3 foils on the other side. Coming in on the opposite side, I just want to make sure that my last pickup does include this peak in her hairline, and it's just going to help support the foil design on the other side. In this temple, she has a good amount of baby hair, so I'm just going to work around that, and I'm going to keep my placement as similar as I can, and then we're going to pivot into a deeper diagonal. This is going to help us cover so much surface space in here with minimal effort. In the sections where her hair goes from root to end in a nice level 6, I'm applying the lightener through the ends, but where she's pre-lightened, I'm feathering through. This way it helps me to get a nice even lift throughout without over processing pre-lightened hair. Okay, now looking at this first hairline section, I'm going to work on connecting the pieces that are longest. So in here, I'm gonna be picking it up, but I'm not going to really be focusing on connecting it to the lower side of each temple area just because it won't connect because the difference in length. But what's helpful to note is that if I pick this up, I can blend out this shadow root. So we don't want this to look like breakage, so we'll just count on the shadow rooting process to help us get a soft blend and transition. I'm gonna like blow out this side. I just wanna make sure that these two front pieces are happening together. Now that I've anchored the first two money piece sections, I'm gonna take deep diagonal sections straight back from this point on in each side. To create more boldness, I didn't leave out a full slice. I wove into the very next section. So that's gonna create a little more heaviness in our face frame placement. By positioning the foils diagonally and moving back, it creates a nice movement and flow of color moving forward towards the face. Unlike doing a diagonal mohawk section, you're gonna create a veil of color. So this is gonna help us to create a really soft transition in the finish. Moving towards the crown on this top side, I'm just gonna go ahead and work along her parting. This is going to keep this process very tight and minimal because we are looking for depth in the crown and pop in the front. So we've done enough placement to accomplish that. So instead of putting 3 more diagonals, I'm going to keep it down to 1 foil. Leaving this whole triangle section out is gonna create a lot of contrast for these ribbons that we're putting just above it. Now we're ready to coast over to the other side, and we'll be putting a similar amount of foils in the same pattern and placement. Looking at the back of Amy's hair, we can see a heavy concentration of previous foil work, and then we see this line of demarcation in just the crown area. My main goal is just to connect the two so that it seamlessly integrates together as one color, and then we'll create a 3rd dimensional pop in 3 key points in the back so it looks very dimensional and has that beachy look that we're going for. To start, I'm just going to take a small subsection. We'll put it aside so that I can take a pretty wide parting. Anything underneath this section will be toned and blended out in the shampoo bowl. We just want to create some connected pieces that will bring all of the tones together. So I'm not going to overthink it. I have a heavy pickup. We'll put it in the foil and then create one just above it. Okay, so now that we have our two connecting pieces, one at a time, I'm gonna pull forward a pretty good amount of hair. And what we'll do is we'll enclose this into a foil so that we have a nice blend here, post toning, and then we have some brightness in here that we can work with. I'm making sure to have really nice saturation because the section's pretty large, and I'm just going to take my finger and make sure it's softened underneath. And then I'll finish by lightly closing a foil on top of each of these three pieces. This is an extremely minimalistic way to create tons of movement and color and ribbons in the hair. You don't have to be overwhelmed when retouching a client because the simpler you make it, the easier it will be to build color session to session. And something that always helps me keep my processes simpler is to step away and look at what's really important. So we've created the foundation in the back, so now we're gonna jump back into the sides and look at how the colors fall together. Looking at Amy's color here on the side, we can see how she has a pretty distinctive front layer here, and then it goes into her length just behind the ear. So I don't want to overwork this because the more foils you put, the less pop and contrast you're able to create. So I'm keeping this in mind when grabbing the next bit of color because I don't want it to be too close to this, nor do I want it to be butting up against the back anchor piece. So I'm going to look at it as right here in the middle. We're going to create just a very soft poppy ribbon, and then in here we'll look at it more as a tip out. To bridge these front shorter layers to the back of the design, I'm going to start the tip out much lower. This tip out will start higher and then go lower. The reason I'm not bringing it up high is because I don't want to lose this really beautiful sandy mid-tone. I want to create 3 shades between her natural, this sandy tone, and then a much brighter tone to achieve this look. So it's important to keep that in mind while putting in the placement. We're gonna create a very similar vibe on the other side, but I'm also gonna be looking at where the layers connect, and it's good to note that I'm working back to front because I don't want her front shorter layers to become more fragile, we want to work from darkest to lightest always. That way we're in full control of our level of lift. Now looking at the other side, she has quite a bit less layers than the side before. So I'm just going to keep my placement as symmetrical as possible. I don't like to overstress or worry too much about things being perfect. I just want to be able to get even lift, and then the rest happens in the toning process. And then on this final placement, we're gonna go in a slight diagonal. I'm not really worried about picking up all these little hairs just because they're not really long enough to feed into the design throughout the whole entire head. And I'm really counting on these foils to bring the brightness into the design. So I'm just kind of superficially adding brightness where there's length. Here's a look at the whole design. Here is our raw lift. We went ahead and pulled the foils around her hairline, moving towards this back. This is a great visual of how much interior depth we left in the side pockets of her hair. This is gonna create a ton of contrast for us. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and shampoo and condition with the triple repair system. So when you're doing minimal foil work, this is now your opportunity to blur out any line of demarcation. So instead of worrying about lightening, we're worrying about the overall look and blending any inconsistent lines in the hair. And I like to shadow from the back moving forward, so it creates a super soft blend. Now that we're here, I'm going to take the 9PV and then bring it through the whole back of the head. Last but not least, we're gonna take teeny little sections in the front. We're gonna just do a teeny little tap. And then for these, instead of going back this way, I'm gonna paint forward. This is just gonna help me keep a really tidy space. And then she's almost ready to rinse. We're gonna have her process in total for about 6 to 10 minutes, moving from the back of the placement to the very front hairline. So as I'm watching it neutralize, I just want to make sure that she's a nice bright beige. I don't want to leave the toner on long enough to where it turns steely-ish or purplish. We just want it to be nice and bright. Before styling, we're gonna use the Triple Repair Split End Mending Serum. This helps seal up to 90% of split ends, and it helps to really close the cuticle, which is perfect after any blonding service. To apply, I'm just gonna take 2 pumps of the serum and squeeze it into the length of her hair, working from mids to ends, and then into the front. I'm finishing this look with dry texture spray. This is such a cool product because it emulates a really beachy aesthetic, and it has a really salty feel to it. Because she has really silky fine hair, instead of piling all the product on the top, I'm taking small sections and doing little mini puffs of spray underneath. That way it builds volume and texture without weighing it down. Here's Amy's final result. She looks so perfect. We are able to create stunning, impactful ribbons exactly where we want to see brightness. And this is also gonna keep her coming in on a 2.5-month appointment schedule, which is really balanced for most clients. So we'll recap her toner. We used 6 NUA to just soften her transition line and her foils, and then 9 PV all over as a flash tone. And here is her beautiful results. If you love this technique, please follow and subscribe to Kenra Professional's YouTube channel right now. There's so many amazing tutorials on here that will help you perfect and refine your craft. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow me at _Wheeler Davis.